Hey, this is News from Heaven. Today we're going to be talking about what it really means to be happy, which is a good thing to talk about because, that's what everybody's trying to do in life. And can we get some kind of program here? What do I need to cut out of my diet? What do I need to put in my diet to get to the place where life is something that I enjoy? And it's not always that way, which is strange because a lot of the times our physical needs can be met, but yet it seems that life wants to and is trying with all its might to interpret things in a way in which the story told makes us miserable, right? And then it wants to continue to remind us about forthcoming events that could cause us harm. It continually makes us dissatisfied with what we do have. Once we get it, it causes us to think harmful, negative thoughts about our neighbor, and on and on. All of this leads us to this mess of the mind that I don't think needs to be there. Because isn't the truth that there is a divine reality? Isn't life better than it seems? So why don't we get clarity on what life really is? Well, it could be there's something going on in us that is absolutely blocking the input that comes out of heaven to us. So let's get that thing scrubbed and squeaky. This is from Secrets of Heaven 3938, and we're going to be talking about emotions and pleasure. I thought that was the same thing. All emotions have their pleasure, but the nature of the emotions determines the nature of the pleasure. So whatever original term Swedenborg is using here, we've got two items. Let's give them their own highlight color. We've got emotions, and then we've got pleasure. So it must be that these are two different things, that an emotion is something that can lead you to pleasure. And already we're getting psychological. This is something that all of a sudden I'm saying, oh, okay, can you get me straight? Could you provide an emotion straightening out service? The desire, here we go. We're about to learn just what these two are. The desire for evil and falsity also has its pleasure. Stop. Okay, so this I understand. A desire for evil and falsity. That's what he's equating with an emotion. So an emotion is sort of like a purpose or could be a craving. And then the pleasure is the reward that we get. And there's something that I feel like is really insightful here, is let's just say it, evil and falsity feel good. And that explains why the world is so messed up. Because it seems like we're often having to just try to hold the line against all this stuff that comes into us. That the mob mentality, the darkness of the human heart, all these things that just seems like we can't keep them back. And you might say, that sounds a little extreme, desire for evil and falsity. Maybe I don't have, I don't care about stealing. Ooh, how do you spell stealing? I think it's... The guy put those two letters right on top of each other, when in a perfect world, there'd be a little E and a little A right there. So stealing is something that actually, to some people, becomes such a source of, if you want to call it something other than pleasure, it's gratification. It's addictive to the point where some people cannot, isn't it called kleptomaniac, where you can't stop yourself from stealing things because that is what you want. There's some kind of desire for it. And you may say, well, that's not me. But the root of evil, according to Swedenborg, is love of power and reputation, right? And then love of sensory gratification. Yeah, so let's see how this stuff shows up. Coming up here. And yeah, why don't you finish the sentence? Okay. And until we regenerate and accept from the Lord a desire for truth and goodness, so this would be the opposite emotion, this seems like the only kind of pleasure. And that I like, because when you are wrapped up, when you are in a state of mind, think if you are in high school and how your popularity, right? Is there anything else? Is there anything else in the world? And if you were to say, especially if you get popular and it feels so cool to kind of run things, not that any of us have ever experienced that, but you kind of like, oh yeah, this person is kind of dumb, so I'll make fun of them. if somebody were to say to you in that moment that all that stuff is nothing, and that the actual pleasure in life is coming from treating people well, and coming from doing useful service, and everything that goodness and truth leads to, this is like, what? None of that stuff exists. You think about the kind of characters that we have in movies. I'm thinking of the greed is good guy, Gordon Gekko is his name, right? And he's saying that's to win this game, the game of wealth and business. That's what life is. Are you telling me that going down to a soup kitchen or something like that is better? No way. This is it. So just to acknowledge, when we get in that state, and I certainly cycle through this as well, that there'll be times when I feel like I don't want to hear anything about this Swedenborg religious kind of stuff. And that stuff has no taste to me, because you're feeling like, no, the stuff that's good is this other stuff, the ego stuff, right? The illusion is so strong that we do not believe any other kind of delight exists. If it were taken from us, we think we would be utterly destroyed. Are you just being dramatic? Well, if you think about Swedenborg's definition of what life is, he says that what we love actually is our life. So, and the love actually being what drives us. It's not just an addendum to your consciousness. That is really what animates you, is the various rewards we think we will get from all kinds of activities. If you felt like, and Swedenborg sees this happen, with spirits in the spiritual world, because they were much more attuned to this kind of stuff. But if you feel like if you lose your chance for happiness, if you feel like the thing I desire is no longer an option, it drains you of your life. And so much so that Swedenborg says, if this becomes your life, desire for even falsity, it's really almost, you feel like it's going to be annihilation if you were not to take pleasure in the things you take pleasure in. Just think about yourself 15 years ago and what you were into. And if someone told you some of that stuff has got to go, how would you have reacted? People who receive from the Lord the delights of a desire for what is true and good gradually see and sense that the delights of their previous life, which they considered irreplaceable, this was it. This was the point. This is the peak experience, are comparatively worthless and even vile. It's harsh, but actually I love it, because you can get into a state where you're dismaying, and this is maybe, I don't know how common this state is, but I was definitely there when I was younger and learning these concepts of Swedenborg's, and sort of what he was holding up as the things that are most precious in life and that are most worth pursuing, and also the ones that are permanent or that are spiritual and can go on and on, where your life is heading if you want to go in this heavenly direction, what your mind will do. Because your mind is very happy and very invested in keeping you, and I say your mind, Swedenborg calls it hell. He's saying that hell and heaven are both influencing us, and so the hell is very happy with this racket where you are stuck in all these various forms of, what Buddhism might call states of craving or of wanting. The hell loves that, because that feeds them in a million different ways. So when you are told there's these amazing delights that are better, the delights of a desire for what is true and good, they say to you, listen, that stuff is so corny, it's cheesy, and it's just inferior. If you think about what we're promising you out here, the thrills of all this stuff, this little be good, be nice to people, blah, that's cheesy, and it can get you distressed, because I'm thinking, just from essence, is this stuff of God really just can't hold a candle to what this stuff is? And is the spiritual path, here's the question I was trying to get to, is the spiritual path, which I would say is the same thing as is the ethical path, is the path that we're trying to take to sort out this mess of life. You think about the example before, when I'm talking about people who are popular and less popular, and the pain that social interaction can cause to people when you're not valued in it. All the stuff that happens between adults in corporations and in all the theaters in which life plays out, everything that hurts us, family, whatever. to sort that out, trying to sort that out. Can't we get to a place where life is happy and we're actually all glad that each other exist, and everybody's on board and is hopeful? And how do we get there? That's the path that we're trying to go to. What behaviors and emotions can we as human beings take on and metabolize and live that will create actually a better world for everyone? Is it really that the path to do that is you've got to leave the stuff that feels the best? That you've just got to acknowledge, look, this stuff over here, the pleasure of evil and falsity, it's so awesome. And yeah, to be whatever it is, to be the ruler of everyone, that would be so great, but we just can't do it because it's not right. There's something that just the artist in you or the addict in you or whatever has a hard time sitting with that. Like, why do you give up the greatest thing for these less refined, less energetic pleasures? And Swedenborg is saying, look, it seems like that to you now. But once you actually let go of those and start to acquire a taste for goodness and truth, it takes time to grow. But once it does grow, then this stuff before that just seemed impenetrably cool is actually worthless and even gross. I don't even want that. So it's not that you're always looking wistfully back over your shoulder at the things you had to leave behind to go to heaven. Eventually, think about the stuff that you used to eat that now you're like, oh, I would never want to do that. Or if you're like, oh, I used to want to, I'm thinking of even for me now, it's like, I don't want to, something starts at 10 o'clock. There's no way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just a metaphor of how something that seemed appealing to you before doesn't appeal anymore. To me, this is important. This is emotional closure around this. The further we enter into the pleasures of a desire for truth and goodness, the more we start to feel disgust and eventually loathing for the pleasures of a desire for evil and falsity. And a key here with this loathing. So this all seems very philosophical and abstract, but how I would read this part, what is it to enter into these pleasures of a desire for truth and goodness? And what's the disgust and eventual loathing? One way that it's popped up to me is the more you understand what evil and falsity are and what they do, the more that you gag on them. Because I'm thinking of, having had a child myself and getting to really spend a lot of time with this little kid as she's growing up and really understanding what the world and mind of a child is and how they are fragile and how they are just like so happy in all these intricate ways and how much their little world matters to them and everything. Now, when I hear on the news stories of horrific things happening to kids, it just hits me like a sledgehammer. Because before it was, it's another headline, something's happened. But understanding just what a child is and to have something happen that's so disruptive and terrible, understanding what that is and what it does, you just develop this disgust for it that you didn't have before. And I think that is true with everyone, that everything, whenever I'm inspired to, man, if I could say this thing, it would really, this person has angered me, so it's really going to humiliate them, and so I'm going to say it, and it's going to get them. Understanding more of how that lingers with them and what it does and what it does to me. And the more that you get that people are people, the more evil and falsity can exist. The reason there has to be falsity with evil is because to actually justify actions that are intentionally harmful, which is a great way to define what evil is, you have to compartmentalize. You have to block out the reality of that we're all conscious people with the same kind of sensitivity and all that stuff. So to me, that's what this Swedenborgian sentence really means. In the other world, I've sometimes talked to individuals who enjoyed evil and falsity. Yeah, we're in the spiritual world. You won't come alive, I've been given the opportunity to tell them, until you've been stripped of your pleasures. What it really means to be happy initially is like the stuff you think is making you happy. The stuff you think is making you happy is not. So this stuff here that we think, yeah, man, whatever our particular ego sort of vices are, and it's not that these are completely eradicated. It's more like they are brought under control and tamed and used in the right proportions. Obviously, there are certain things that have to go, but it's about balance. But for the sake of illustration here, let's see these as elements that need to get removed. The first step is you gotta give up some pleasure, because it's that stuff that's overloading your system. The perfect, and I wouldn't say just metaphor, but correspondence is, if you're trying to eat healthier food than you used to eat, initially giving up fast food and sugar or whatever it is, doesn't feel good at all. You go on it, you're trying to moderate what you're eating or what you're doing, or you start exercising, whatever it is. That doesn't feel good at all. Initially, it's a giving up of pleasure. Same thing with spiritual work. So get rid of this stuff that's driving all these negative thoughts, or feeding or fueling the racket that allows those negative thoughts in. That's the first step. But naturally, this is what we say, and we go through this process in a miniature every time we come up across some principle in spiritual stuff that asks us to examine our current life. If we're stripped of them, we won't have any life left, they say, as people like them in the world do. So this is just something that people are just like this. Hey, I like this thing. You take it away, I'm not going to have anything. That's the point at which life starts, I've been allowed to answer. And with it, a happy life, like the life in heaven, which is just about indescribable. We said, what does it really mean to be happy? That the noise around the other stuff can at times masquerade as happiness, but you always know that it's going to crash eventually. The kind of life that's in heaven is a life you can be proud of and feels great, and eventually feels way better, that we're actually selling ourselves way short pursuing this negative stuff. They cannot understand, though, because people dismiss anything with which they're unfamiliar. I don't know what that is. It's got to be nothing. The same holds true for all in the world who love themselves and their worldly advantages and therefore lack neighborly love. So when we love ourselves, and I know this is a difficult thing to talk to the internet too about this time, because we've just had this whole, we're coming out of the past of the guilt-inducing religious infrastructure, and we're saying, look, loving yourself is important. And when I was back here in the beginning, all this negative stuff coming into the head often is critical of you and your character. So you think, yeah, to push back on this stuff and say you love yourself is good. And it is good. I found for myself, it's only if you do that as your only strategy, eventually I just play into the hands of these thoughts. Because as soon as I really say, look, I'm really important and I need to love myself, they know how to get me worried about myself. So what I found is to be more effective is to, you love yourself and you trust that you're going to be taken care of and loved by divine providence rather than by my own efforts. That starts to get impenetrable. This loving yourself is not that. This loving yourself is the craving to be a greater human than anyone else. This is the desire for power, for admiration, for praise, not for the sake of any use, but just to feel superior. Love of self is kind of this mob mentality. I will help you if you help me, but if not, I'm going to crush you. That's the essence of love for yourself. And that we can have that in whatever volume. But when we have that, and when we love our worldly advantages, when we place the pleasure in, look at this, I don't care if everyone else doesn't have what they need, I really got what I need. If that's all we care about, without looking to turn the good stuff in our life into use, that makes it so we just can't understand neighborly love. It's too loud, it crowds it out. But that this thing is actually the key. This is what's coming in and promising you a happy future and the ability to help others. And this has been amazing for me to see this play out. I'm certainly not at the end of this process, but I can start to see this stuff, that there's truth to it, that this other stuff was keeping me locked into a negative cycle, and this new stuff is so invulnerable. When you really say, look, I want to make neighborly love the main thing, man, that makes it so much harder for these things to get a toehold in. Which is something I love saying on this show. I say it all the time, but it's true all the time. Still less, they know how, this is a great sentence. They know how gratifying the former love is. Love of reputation, love of sensory gratification, but not the latter, or neighborly love. We don't understand. It's like a in ecosystems, there are certain species that can only exist. They're sort of indicator species. The ecosystem has to be really healthy for them to be able to have the right habitat and food sources and everything and live. That they're so fragile that you only get them if things are really carefully managed and really healthy. So it is with this neighborly love. It's not blaring and loud and cheap like the love of power and worldly advantages. So we just don't understand that it's there or that it's anything. So they have no idea at all what charity is. Still less do they realize that we can find pleasure in charity, when in reality, that pleasure fills every corner of heaven, rendering it blissful and happy. So real happiness is actually this thing, this little thing that was kind of almost swept aside. This little charity. Isn't that how the story is? Jesus is born in this little manger out there. I can't think of them now, but there's a million little stories of this thing, the ugly duckling, right? Turns into the swan. We right now have this charity that we feel like this is this little ugly duckling. It's not flashy or cool like these other things that are much more fun, but actually that's going to become the swan. That is going to be the swan. Plus, this whole paragraph before I got to bring up my favorite story ever, the Christmas Carol, actually the Muppet Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge. Man, isn't the whole story there? He loves himself and worldly advantages, and he's discovering through the visits from those ghosts and the impact he has on people actually what neighborly love is. That's what I'm talking about. Believe it or not, it even produces, this charity, even produces, here's the benefit package, understanding and wisdom and pleasures associated with these qualities. So not only does it make you happy, but it makes you healthy and it makes you smart. You see, the Lord flows into the joy of charity with a shining light of truth and the burning flame of goodness. And so with understanding and wisdom, how could you not want that? How could you not want that to be your life management plan? Falsity and evil reject, choke, and twist that influence, bringing about stupidity and madness. Side effects. This clarifies the identity and nature of the pleasurable emotions that correspond to the happiness of eternal life. And everything that's about eternal life can be applied now. It's a journey to get there, but what the whole message is look, these clouds are going to say, come over here and worry about this. Heaven is going to say, come to this, and here's some peace and truth, and believe in this, and that gives you peace and truth. The difference, and as we can totally go in both directions anytime we want, multiple times per day. The difference is there's nothing here. It's an illusion. There's nothing behind it. What's behind here, you can already see. This entire cosmic field of heavenly happiness that you can get immersed in and grow from and learn from forever. So that's what it really means to be happy. And that's the news from heaven. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Let me know in the comments, was this good? Was it something that you feel like you can use during your week? And come join us for the Off the Left Eye experience. We are going to be doing a 3-day weekend retreat here in Bryn Athyn, Pennsylvania, where you can come and with us get into these ideas in depth and explore them from every angle in all these cool different environments. It should be fun. Come hang out with us. All right, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate you spending some time. Man, did I like talking about this. Hope that you have a good day.